What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Binge Empire and our coverage of FX, Hulu, Disney Pluses, all the above, Alien Earth. So this is going to be episode 3, Metamorphosis. We're going to get into this episode, but first, we're going to introduce our third member. So Luke missed the episode 1 and 2 recording because he was being a very diligent boyfriend, but now he's here, and he is what we would say, I guess, our resident Alien fan. So I'm very interested to hear his takes on the first 2 episodes, and then we'll talk about this third episode.
Yeah, you guys did a fantastic job on the first podcast. I was just smiling ear to ear the whole time. You're calling out the actors and all these things. And I'm a little disappointed in Paul. I called him out on our group chat on the side here, but I think me and his favorite character based on that podcast, Boy Cavalier, also makes an appearance in The Sandman, which he just got finished covering with Dave, another Bingetown member. He's actually plays William Shakespeare, which is just a hilarious cameo that he makes in the first season. He's awesome. But yeah, he's the freaking man. But overall, you guys did a great job. I know that there is so much supplemental content out there right now on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube around Alien because there's so much lore out there. But I'm not going to say that I'm a subject matter expert. I have seen every Alien movie, but I haven't read any of the comics. I haven't played any of the video games, which I know actually do have legit canon. I do my best to just absorb as much as I can, and I'm obsessed with the lore around Alien. So I think I'll be able to point out some things here and there. And there are a couple things I want to throw out there to you guys. Maybe I'm not sure how much you know about the background of some of the movies. I know you guys have watched recaps and stuff like that, but you guys did a great job. But there's some things that I just want to put out there that I've been using and watching this show through the lens of. And overall, there wasn't too much yet, but there's going to be a lot. And the first thing I want to say right off the bat is talking about Wayland, who is the other half of the family name of Weyland-Yutani. And if you haven't seen Prometheus, which is the earliest movie in the timeline of the Alien universe, Wayland actually ends up dying. So that's why right now Yutani is represented by the granddaughter of who knew Morrow here. So that's the head of Weyland-Yutani. There was a Wayland ancestor or a descendant of the original Wayland that created the company, but she ended up dying too. So I think until the show corrects us or there's other canon that I just don't know about, like Yutani, the one that we know, is just the head of that entire faction. There's some stuff to break down because we actually got a cool screenshot when Morrow was doing his dive into Boy Cavalier, and you got to see some of the world history. I'll bring that up when we get there. But I just wanted that out there. Another thing that maybe I'm going to drop. I'm going to let retcons happen if they happen. But if you've seen any of the Alien movies, you know that synths are the only non-humans that actually make it off Earth. So I don't know if the show is going to really lean into the idea of cyborgs and the hybrids, because unless they're going to retcon a bunch of things, there are no cyborg or hybrids in the future in all of the Alien movies, which makes it a little weird. But who knows? They can always change whatever they want to, and I'm here for it all. I'm not really married to any of the lore. I don't have hard set rules that I think that they can't break. They can really do whatever they want. And that brings me to the third piece and the most important one. I talked to you, Kyle, this weekend about this, but after I was doing a binging of all the Alien movies, the last one takes place a couple hundred years after the timeline now. It's the only one that's a 200-year time skip, and it's called Alien Resurrection. It's the last one, I think. And what happens at the very end of the movie, which I was doing some research today, I think is actually a deleted scene, but it's also it was in the version I watched. I can't confirm that it's deleted or not, but the clone of Ripley, who's the main character that survives all the movies, ends up going to Earth and actually lands on Earth. And what you see is you get a glimpse. She's in Paris, and you see the Eiffel Tower broken in half. It is a complete desert dystopian world, kind of like Fallout in that way, where everything looks destroyed. But then there's one line that Winona Ryder, who also survives and is with Ripley in this scene, says that the military might be sniffing around here. That's the only thing they say. So that kind of implies that there is still life on Earth, but everything is decimated. There's no green anywhere to be seen, at least in that scene. So I guess I'll throw it to you guys to get your take on what you think that means. Because some people are theorizing Alien Earth is going to end with the events that lead up to that. But also, if it is truly a deleted scene, they might not consider it canon, and they can kind of ignore that. But what do you think about the idea of the end game being of Alien Earth showing maybe the infestation and overtaking of the xenomorphs that end up killing pretty much everything?
Yeah, that's interesting. Right now, if in my mind, I would just assume the aliens win, right? Human life gets
Mhm.
wiped out. Well, but then there's like no, I don't know. It's really interesting. I'm gonna try to watch with that in the back of my mind and not think about it instantly, because I think we did discuss it. They are making some changes. A lot of people
Mhm.
believe that like the future obviously could be a big one, but that would be really, really interesting. They were able to tie it in. Maybe humans just no, they didn't abandon Earth because they said military still there. Yeah, that just adds a lot more context. And I would like to see it happen, but I don't want any of our boys to get hurt, you know?
And I just sent you guys a picture of just screenshots when I went and grabbed them. So just look at that real quick to get a little bit more of the vibe that I'm trying to describe with what Earth looks like when they land. And it's a 1 minute scene. And again, it most of the YouTube videos, if you're looking it up, says deleted scene or extra scene. So I don't know if they're going to make this part of the canon. They can completely ignore it, and it is totally fine with me. Just something that's going to be on the back of my mind when we get to the end of the season, and if there's more seasons, the end of the series.
I'll be honest, way more buildings than I was anticipating.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, yeah.
So that looks like some still livable. I mean, it doesn't look great, but it looks livable.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
like they like nuked Earth for like
Yeah.
when you were describing it. But no, that's definitely interesting and can definitely have a part to play. And you know, they said military, but they didn't say any of the five, big players. So
Mm-mm. Mhm.
would be interesting.
What's
Ooh,
good? It's
and
got it good.
the last thing I want to say before we can actually like start breaking down this third episode is I'm surprised, Kyle, that do you recognize the actor that plays Joe slash Hermit besides from Andor? Did you look into what else he was in?
I did, and I remember thinking, oh, at another one of the entries, but I don't remember
Mhm.
what it was now that we're talking
The
about
the
it.
only reason I'm bringing this up is because I know you haven't watched too much Black Mirror, but he is the main character of the Black Mirror episode you hate with all your heart that has Sir Bron in it, and it's like it's called Shut Up and Dance. It's like the one with the blackmail over his like the pornography stuff
Oh,
that he
I
was looking
guess
at. Yeah.
it would be that I've never actually seen the whole episode, so
Yeah, it made you cringe too much, so you kind of hated it. I remember that was
it was
always a
just like I
thing.
don't, yeah, I don't need to watch this episode. But
Yeah.
it's also funny because I honestly thought you were gonna say, going off of the first point and those 3 points you just laid out of Lady Emily. There you go. I almost called her the actress, the other part that she plays, but Utani. We just watched her in Foundation. She's in Wheel of Time as well.
We
Ah,
did talk about that, I think, off pod
Yeah,
before.
offline. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just another one, another actor, another character in the show that we've seen before, we've covered before. So just to give you a little hint too of how wide of a breadth of the shows that we're covering over here on the Binge Empire. But to the second and third point you make too is it's almost easiest to respond to that of like, well, then what's the point
Mhm.
mm,
of the show? If you think like, well, synths are the only ones that make it off of Earth, and in the future, Earth is going to be not necessarily completely destroyed, but not in the shape that we're seeing it right now. And I guess it just makes me really focus a lot more on like the character interactions and like the relationships more than maybe this overarching battle for supremacy that they kind of open this whole season with.
Yeah. And that actually just triggered one more thing that I just want to put out there. I know there's a lot of talk on the internet right now, and there's been things that the writer of the show has said about the possibility of the connecting to predators at some level. It's kind of notorious in the sci-fi, movie community that Alien mostly ignores all of the Predator stuff, but there is the Alien universe, there's the Predator universe, and then there's the Alien versus Predator universe. And in the Alien versus Predator movie, there is another Wayland, but I don't think he's canon to just the Alien verse. So like they could also, if they decide to combine it all, have another Wayland character show up, and it could make sense if they want to take that route. There's a lot of things that they can do, and I'm here for it all. I think this show is so damn fun. The cinematography is amazing. It's already a top 3, if not top 1 show of all time with closing out music only through 3 episodes. Like my God, the third one got me hyped just as much as the first 2. It's such a fun show. I'm having such a good time watching all of this.
yeah, yeah. It's a blast, and it is entertaining. It's a mystery at the same time, and there's all the action. And as Kyle said last episode, they do not pull back from the gore. They said, "Hey, we got a prop department, we are going to use that to its full potential. And they did. They're crushing it. So to jump right in, let's just talk about our two main characters, brother and sister. That's going to be Wendy and Hermit. And, their first scene, Wendy finds Hermit, in this supposed trap. So I'm having trouble figuring out how to watch this show because a regular horror movie, like you can't read too much into the scenes. They're supposed to just get as much suspense pulled out of you as possible. And you kind of throw logic out the window. Hence, in horror movies, while they have people like don't go into the dark basement where the killer is and then go anyway because it's suspense. So with this, I want to say they're trying to tell us something and adding to the story with Wendy being in front of Hermit and almost protecting him, and the xenomorph almost recognizing that and backing out. Were you guys getting that, or were you guys just getting, hey, we're going to make this episode suspenseful right off the bat, and we're going to put our two heavy hitters in a precarious situation?
The pacing of this started off with gas. Like I didn't know how quickly they were going to resolve this first xenomorph and actually end up killing it. But it's a good question. And I feel like the actions and behaviors of xenomorphs aren't necessarily the most consistent thing in the universe. And one of the things that is consistent, though, that I would hope that people don't miss is there are cases where xenomorphs don't instantly kill humans. Like they'll take them and usually either put an egg in there or something. Like they'll take them and even bring them back to the nest or the hive and like tie them up. Like that's happened in Aliens too, like a bunch of times. So I just we're watching a TV show. There was no way Hermit was going to die like off screen, like in the way that they kind of closed out episode 2. But back to the conversation you guys had on the last podcast. I'm still trying to feel out how the aliens are reacting to the lack of fear, because that's kind of been something that they're leaning into. And I just don't think Wendy necessarily has like a human level of fear that would attract it. But it did seem like it was going to attack her. So I don't know. It was pretty confusing part. I don't know, Kyle, what was your take on that?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that question too of you. I thought the concept of the xenomorph using Joe as bait almost was interesting, but also was it doing it to bait Wendy, or was there any type of ulterior motive there? Not entirely sure. It seems like we're supposed to be walking away from these episodes, I think, intrigued about not only the relationship between the non-human entities, so even with Morrow, who we know is probably the most human biologically of anyone, of the synths, the cyborgs, the hybrids. It had its moment with him. Now it has a moment with Wendy. Not entirely sure what the actual answers are. I think also that kind of lends itself to an additional conversation about what the hell's going on at the end of this episode and kind of throughout the first two of with her hearing. And she just has this connection in a way with either the xenomorph, the face huggers, the eggs, the something is there. And it's fine that we don't have the answer. It's interesting. And I want to watch every episode from now on out to find out the answer, but it's doing a good job of making us want to know.
Yeah. And that connection that Wendy has, I had the same exact thoughts. Like, are we supposed to think that Wendy, okay, just to get us there, when Wendy, gets the xenomorph behind the locked door, we don't see anything. We only see Hermit's perspective, which he's a boss biting off the nuts to get to the wires. I was like, you're the man. Are we supposed to assume that something happened behind closed doors? Maybe the xenomorph planted some type of seed. We saw Kirsch pull out like a larva off of a face hugger. I don't know. Or is that supposed to just be Wendy's super hearing? And when the face huggers are screeching, she hears it immediately. But like they also showed like the veins in her neck, and like she was like flexing them like she was actually in pain too and passed out. So I want to say there is some connection there, but it is obviously a mystery. at this
Why
point.
wouldn't the other hybrids have reacted in the same way? Because I had the same thought. Like, there's nothing that we have seen on screen that sets Wendy apart from the other hybrids besides her being first. So unless Boy Cavalier did something special to her to allow her to have heightened senses or something past the normal hybrids, I can't figure it out. And also, it's been said so many times, like the xenomorphs aren't going to try and have they're not going to try and like use synthetic humans or synthetic bodies to try and grow more xenomorphs, unless that's like a new concept that they're trying out for the show, which could work, but I just would need a lot more of an explanation before I could buy it.
Yeah, I think I would be really gung ho on the idea that something happened behind the door. You know, we see Wendy's kind of injured. She's leaking, let's say, the white sauce,
Yeah.
you know, the milk from
Mhm.
her head. So you could connect some dots there of then that is kind of the thread that runs to the end of the episode of why she is, you know, dealing with all this stuff, especially specifically in her mind and in her head. But I'm just still thinking of like episodes 1 and 2. She was like the only one in the ship who was kind of like, are you guys hearing that? You know, and
Mhm.
no one else seemed to be
Mhm.
having that same experience with the sounds, with the visuals. And they started it off this episode of her walking down the hallway and it's just like creature chattering. She even hears it when she's on the table when she wakes up when Dame Sylvia
Mhm.
is still sleeping. So there's something there. I think it's more than just when she murked the xenomorph in the beginning with that like paper cutter katana,
Mhm.
which is so funny
Dude, the
that she's
tongue cut
just
was wild. I thought that was so
Great.
badass. He's just leaking acid out of his mouth. That was awesome.
well. Also, Paul, do you recognize those hooks? That hook.
Is that a meat hook for
Yeah,
that
baby. We
freezer?
used to rock those at Hill's Quality Seafood, baby. We used to drag everything around with those meat hooks. So
Mhm.
I love that it played a big role here. That cracked me up.
Yeah, there was a lot of good stuff between these two. Like the chemistry is amazing because when the xenomorph finally comes to the edge of the crate, our boy Hermit is like, "Yo, I'm a soldier. You're a child. Let me go first." And she's like, "Not anymore." Which I just
Mhm.
love that line. And then when Wendy does hook the xenomorph's tongue, Joe's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I don't know." She's just like, I'm just winging it." And then she's like, "Oh shit, the
Yeah.
door." And then just to go off that scene, I had a straight up heart attack when I almost called him Remick. When Hermit got stabbed through with the tail, I was like, no way, right? Like, no
Mhm.
way. Because me and Kyle had the conversation at the end of last episode is like, yeah, is like, is Hermit gonna die as he's falling? And we're like, no, he can't. But I genuinely got scared. But he was a beast and able to get to the door and still worried about his sister while profusely bleeding out of his abdomen.
You know, it's
Mhm.
interesting. We didn't talk about it in the first 2 episode coverage, and it really came in a moment here when Wendy is again leaking. She's clearly hurt in some way, and Hermit, he's obviously incapacitated himself, so he can only kind of say like "stay with me." But in reality, like if he was perfectly fine, what is he gonna do? Like he is a human medic, you know. So that's an interesting, I think, dynamic in that he is kind of trained his whole life
Mhm.
in medicine, and he's a field medic and all this stuff, but he literally can't do anything for her. Like all of that knowledge he has is useless to protect his little sister. And that I think will become an interesting thing as we move forward, depending on what the heck happens with him.
And what was the organ that got stabbed? Did we see what that was? Was that his lungs? Was that
They
his
took out his
liver? Was that
lung, yeah.
okay? It was his lung. Okay, okay. So that's
That
where he got
was
Yeah.
hit right in the side. Yeah.
okay. I had questions about that lung, and we'll get to it. So
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
is all right. That's good to know.
Yeah. Kyle
And
knows
then
his organs.
yeah, it does.
Mhm.
I have eyeballs and there was an x-ray.
Yeah, I took basic biology in elementary school. I know what a lung looks like. Okay, so the next little couple scenes I wanted to talk about were Smee, Slightly, and Morrow and their whole big interaction. Was there anything that you before we get there though that you guys wanted to touch on about Kirsch and Cavalier's quick conversation? Because Cavalier chimes in and he's like, "Just assume I know everything, right? I can see out of your eyes." He was, I mean, I know Cavalier built him, but like he was talking down to him a little bit. I wasn't exactly a big fan. I don't know what you guys took away from that.
I'm a diehard Kirsch fan, especially because he is like the stand-in for the Michael Fassbender David character. Not a stand-in. That seems like I'm taking away from his uniqueness, but I gravitate towards that type of character. That he's going to be he's going to have his own character work going on here as a complete synth. But yeah, I don't know. He just seems like he's pretty science minded first here. And he does say that he confirms that. I don't know if they said it earlier that there's 5 previously undiscovered species on board. And that's what he's telling Boy Cavalier. And then that's all he wants because he knows he's going to political war with Utani now and he wants the bioweapons. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just used to the idea of him talking without like thinking through human emotions, and he's just really just analyzing it and taking it at face value. But I don't know. I don't have any other thoughts besides I love that Kirsch is such a big actor because I think he's going to have such a good character arc for the rest of the season.
Yeah, the Kirsch stuff I have is probably best saved for some later scenes and conversations.
Gotcha. One of Kirsch's best scenes, he doesn't start out in, he does show up halfway, and that is when Smee and Slightly are having a tiny reunion, catching each other up, and they're
great.
Brilliant. Just so good. Bro, dude, every sentence. And like, oh, I missed it. They're incredible. And then even when Morrow comes up, Morrow like has his weapon drawn. He's like, put your guns down. They're like kids. They don't understand the situation they're in. They're like twirling their arms. Like, we don't have guns and like all this other crazy stuff. It's amazing how they're able to think it through. And, you know, even Morrow is like, wait, what are you guys like children? Like, I don't understand what's going on. His reaction to it was hysterical because he's like, what is happening? So I absolutely loved this confrontation, I guess. And then it kind of blossoms into later in the episode like a stalker situation. Very interesting. But my last thing on this is when Kirsch comes in to save the day, I felt so safe. Kirsch is just so good. He had so many good lines. And when Morrow says, you know, oh, like, what are you, a synth? I don't talk to errand boys. Kirsch's response was, tell me, what nation are you king of? I was like, dude, this guy's an animal. I love him.
Yeah, he really is.
Morrow, I think, might be my favorite character.
Ooh, that was quick.
I'm really interested in the story. I thought this scene was awesome. I think the actor, I believe his name, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, I apologize, but I think his name is Babu Sise. He's so good. And I love, because we talked about this, Paul, in the episode 1 and 2 conversation of we need so much more information about him because he like kind of he moves and acts and speaks and almost thinks more like I would say a synth would in a certain way. Because to me, a cyborg, like, you might have some enhancements, but like it was just like the fact that he could like create the knife out of his arm and things like that. But he is so like one track minded, just like robotic in certain ways. And again, this episode was even more interesting when I don't remember if it's me or Slightly or Kirsch or how it's pre-Kirsch, I believe, actually. But they're kind of calling him out of like, oh, like you're a robot. And he says, if only, you know, I'm the worst parts of a man. And is that just like having like a conscience? I could see that being, you know, the worst parts of a man, like the things that he's had to do. He talks of like, you have no idea what I've been through, what it's been like to put the mission above everything else and all of that stuff. And it clearly haunts him of everything that he's kind of been forced almost to do. You know, what are the exact enhancements that he has? How has he changed? It has to be something with his brain, the way he's plugging in and then they're able to kind of like download his memory and stuff like that. And then it'll get more interesting. We probably talk a little bit later of like the phone call and then what his plan might end up being. So like his story to me is, I think, the most interesting to follow. Everything is interesting, but I think for him, for me, he's at the top of the heap at the moment.
This was an amazing episode for him as a character for me. Like, he is such a necessary point of view, and I didn't realize it as much until after episode 3. I kind of binged the first 2 while recently compared to you guys, so that's probably why I didn't have time to think about it. But his point of view is perfect because the fact that he hasn't been on Earth, he arrives here, he has questions. He's been in cryo sleep, and like people explain things to him. Like, we find out we're in New Siam here. Like, he didn't know what country he's in. He doesn't know who's in control, which that's one of my favorite things later. That's when he calls slightly in a future scene, and we'll talk about all of that. But you're right. Like, he's awesome. He even explains here, it might have already been said, that they got all of these eggs that were there from like a random moon. Like, he's such a perfect vehicle for the writers to just give us background information. But I agree. And then also he says that he was downloading all the data from Mother in this scene, and it's everything that he can essentially report back to Wayland Yutani. He's getting the biometric data that they were using and testing on their trip back home here. I was a little confused because they don't actually clarify what specifically the data transfer was until the later scene, but that is what it was. So that's perfect. He's a great character. I'm looking forward to more of him. And you were saying it in the last podcast. He's the man behind enemy lines. He has no allies here. And it is a cool concept. And they clarify later, and you said it right in your last time you were talking, was that he is super dedicated to his mission. And I think that actually answers a couple of things that you guys were discussing, which is like why there's no fear. He actually appreciates the science of the xenomorph and only cares about that. So maybe he's not excreting whatever fear pheromones like that would attract him, and that's why. Because that was one of the most confusing scenes for me, of why a human like him, even if he's only part human, should have been a target for the xenomorph, but it wasn't. And he goes into here saying he cares so much about the data and the mission, so maybe that explains some things. I want to see more of that, and if that's a consistent character trait, it's going to make the first 2 episodes look even better in hindsight. But great character.
It wouldn't really be a question on the fear line if the opening if the crash stuff wasn't something that we saw of the xenomorph trying to get to him so hard. But that could be just something else. So that could be, different than necessarily the fear mechanism. I'm sure we'll get a lot of information.
Well, just to build off of that, a possibility there is he is so dedicated to his mission, and his ship is in the middle of crashing. He could genuinely be fearful that the whole mission was for naught. So that could actually explain why he was being attacked. And you guys nailed it. Morrow, while we really liked him as a character for the first 2 episodes, this one just really blew the doors wide open on him, because we got some of that backstory. We got some of that motivation. We were saying, why are all cyborgs like lacking this humanity? He's just killing his crew without like a second thought. Turns out he hated it. He didn't want to do it, but I guess the technology in his brain, he just needs to listen to Mother and just be like, the mission is the mission. And the motivation like explains so much too. I mean, we're just able to work out so much of it, because this is 65 years was this mission. He even said, everybody I knew is basically dead or gone or not even thinking about me. This is all I have left. This is my legacy. So totally explains why he would turn around and go back into the fire instead of, skirting home like Yutani wants.
Yep. Yeah. And it could be even, like you're saying too, more than just programming. Like it has to be worth it. Everything that he's given up at the end of the day, it has to be worth it. His family, parts of his humanity, that's why he has to just keep moving forward. And it's such an interesting, it's not a parallel. It's not necessarily a comparison, but it is like him as the cyborg versus the kids as the hybrids versus Kirsch as the synth. And, they open the whole show with that concept of this is the battle, but it's going to be so interesting to get to know all of them as characters, more than just concepts, and that's just as we learn more and more about him, of like, what's it actually like to be a cyborg? We're learning it pretty much sucks ass. To be a cyborg, it seems like. Being a hybrid seems great. It seems almost like the best of both worlds for these kids, at least. Obviously the synths play in their own kind of realm of there's positives, but also they don't really have any level of emotional tie to things. So I think exploring Kirsch as well in relation to the other two is just going to be a blast. I mean, there's going to be just great scenes and conversations in each episode, I'm assuming.
And let's just take it home with the Morrow stuff. And talk about the 2 phone calls that he has later in the episode. He does have the quick one with Yutani, which kind of goes over everything we were talking about, his motivation, his dedication to the work, and he kind of shuts her down. He big dogs it a little bit. I liked that from him. I also am super interested in this Yutani character. Just I want more of her on the screen. I think she'll play more of a part as time goes on. That aside, though, I really want to focus on his conversation when he calls Slightly. Did he put the little chip on him when he was choking him out, and that's how he's like able to call him? Is that what we're supposed to?
That's what I got. Initially, I thought that it was a wound that healed on Slightly quickly, and it was just showing that he was gripping him very roughly. But that was the only explanation I could think of, is he did insert something in there.
Yeah, because we saw him look at the little tab on him. I don't know. Maybe that was it. Maybe I really don't know. But either way, I don't even care about their conversation here. I was focused on pausing the screen and reading the little write-ups that he was trying to catch up on Earth politics. And what I took from it was it actually did finally lay out all 5 of the corporations that own the world. And we knew the name of 3 of them, I think, already, or maybe even 4, but it was just Threshold, Weyland Yutani, which has North America, South America, Mars, and Saturn, the Dynamic Corp, which has the moon. Those are the only things that have been named so far. And then the 2 newer ones being Lynch Corporation and Prodigy. They're the 5 is what it's called. There wasn't too much more to break down, like from what I could read, especially because you couldn't see the whole screens. But it is nice that they actually went to the level of like detail and just trying to write that all out, give it to us in some way.
Threshold is the coolest. That's the coolest name.
I mean, I've got to learn a little bit more about Threshold. I don't know. It's not about the name. It's about what they represent. And Prodigy, I don't know. I don't like either of the ones that we know too much about right now. I love that the show has different channels to get you information. Like Luke just said, like you can pause the screen and actually get tidbits of information to the narrative, which makes me want to believe that it's more than just a suspense show, that they are telling us a story through these scenes, and it's not just to pull out as much emotion as possible. So I love Morrow and all that motivation. And oh shit, I forgot about this. Got to say, this Morrow Slightly Smee scene right before Morrow shows up, the 2 kids are going back at it like, check this out. And they're like lifting their leg over the egg. And he's like, no, I can do it too. Lift it. I was like, you have no idea the danger that you are doing, but that is 100% something that kids would do. So
they're so good at acting like the kids. It's really funny. You know, we talked about it on the last podcast episode of the kind of stuff that they did to prepare to get into that mental state. And I'm sure it was just so much fun to act that way. I'm kind of curious, and now because we talked about it again, I'll reference last episode of the elevator doors being magical in a way, and it doesn't matter to me whatsoever. But I was interested in the Morrow kind of moving around in New Siam, and they kind of say in a different scene, like, you know, his picture's out there, all this information about him's out there. And I was just interested in, maybe it's my cynical nature about the way that our world's currently heading, but like, how can he just like walk around and like use a phone and like go on the internet and like not get like facial recognition somewhere or something? You know, I wonder how long he has to actually like bide time in New Siam City.
Yeah.
I got to learn more about the world. Maybe the population's too crazy. We're like, oh, can't even track that many people. But I agree, it was weird. And I was honestly a little taken back too when he was like eating food. I'm like, I know he's a cyborg and like half human, but I was like, oh, okay. Regular human stuff. He just eats. Okay, so I want to talk about Cavalier. He's amazing. Young Shakespeare. He has a few different scenes here with a few different characters. You know, he does talk with his crew. His crew pushes back on him a little bit while they're, you know, talking supposedly behind his back, but of course hears about it. But then the other scene that I really wanted to talk about was with Curly when she pops into his office, because we got the motivation episode 2, which I absolutely loved. Cavalier just wants another brilliant mind to entertain him, to be able to have an intelligent conversation with. And I did not expect Curly to be the one. I didn't expect any of the Lost Boys to step up and actually want to educate themselves, actually tell him, I do think about things, I don't just react. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? Like, I don't know.
No, I want it on the board that Curly versus Wendy is going down at some point. They're going to fight to the death. And I think that it's coming from a bad place. I don't know if you just lose more and more of your humanity as time goes on. But Curly says, like, I don't have any human connections that I care about. I just care about getting smarter and being better. And she's acting like she doesn't care about being his favorite, but then says it again later in that conversation. So she clearly has this parental trying to seek the approval situation going on. So I think that it's going to turn out bad for Wendy, and Wendy's going to have to take her out. But she's interesting. She wasn't really on my radar, and now she's fully on my radar after that scene.
It's interesting when you ask the question, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I think from the audience perspective, it's a fantastic thing. It's so interesting. It's great for the TV show. Again, like Luke said, I didn't expect this at all. I am wondering, because they talk it earlier in the episode about, why Peter Pan, why the Lost Boys, why couldn't we pick our own names? And she mentions that, I'm pretty sure that in the books they call Curly Pickle because he always, or she always, I'm not familiar. I guess it's he because the Lost Boys, but he's always in a pickle in some way, in trouble. And it seems like Curly is going to be getting herself in some trouble with the way that she's acting, with the way that she's thinking. And then it kind of leads me to believe of like, what other hints are there about the other names for the other Lost Boys? Like, how much is the show trying to kind of tell us almost how some of their stories are going to go? But I'm so happy that this is a storyline with Curly. It's great that she's kind of, and I'm sure it's in her own mind, like, I'm not a kid anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I'm smart. Like, I care about things. Like, I want to learn while all these other idiots are just kind of joking around. And it's going to be interesting because she has some great lines in this conversation. When she claps back at Boy Cavalier and says, smart people don't ask dumb questions, I was like, oh, he's going to be perked up in this conversation. Like, that'll get his attention for sure. And then my dad always threw the first pancake in the trash. It's like, all right, she's hunting, she's rooting, out for that number one spot. But like you said, Luke, that's definitely the kid side still in her of, so am I your favorite now? Like, that's exactly how a kid would think. So I'm at millionth time. We always joke about it on the Foundation coverage, but like, it's just interesting. I'm interested.
Everybody drink.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she has that motivation where she wants to learn. He's literally fueling her. He's like, I'm going to give you some books, a couple things to read, and then we can discuss it back and forth. So she can become like Kirsch 2.0. Like, it's actually insane, the machine learning aspect of it. So
keep your eye on her.
And while we're talking about Lost Boy names, ashamed to admit, I just put together watching this episode that Wendy is named Wendy from Peter Pan. Took forever for me to put that together.
There was a line earlier. There was a line earlier. I think it might have been from Curly saying like, "Why does she get to be Wendy? Like, we're all the boys or whatever." It might have been last episode, but yeah.
No, yeah, that was the beginning of this one, and that's actually where I was like, oh, Wendy also wasn't Peter Pan. I didn't realize that. And
that's
that was
Nibs that says that. Yeah, and she has an interesting episode. Again, I apologize for the I word, but it's not long. She doesn't get a ton of scenes, but she is almost on the opposite end of Curly on this spectrum of how much we're enjoying being synthetic, or I'm sorry, being a hybrid, in where she just doesn't seem comfortable in the body. She wants to kind of go home. She wishes she could pick her name. It feels like she's feeling all of this is being forced upon her. And again, it's her storyline is going to grow. I loved the way that her looking in the mirror I'm not entirely sure 100% what this message is, but again, it's interesting to think about it. Like, what are they trying to really tell us here? She is going to be a wild card in some sense, and also because we didn't talk about it a ton on the first podcast episode, but it gets intertwined with her story here of what are they doing to the walls? What are they spraying? Is it the aftermath of something that happened that we're trying to fix? Is it like preventative in nature? Is it just pest control? I don't really know how much I understood a lot of her scenes beyond the fact that she's not really comfortable in the
Identity
body.
crisis.
Yeah, but it's still interesting nonetheless.
Totally agree. They didn't give her a bunch of screen time, but they were able to tell us so much about it. Like you're saying, you nailed it. Curly is, I love my new body. She Nibs is saying, I'm losing my identity and myself. And it's something that they have to worry about now. Hybrids aren't just going to plop into their new shell and be like honky dory, everything's all right. Like she could barely like believe that it was reality. She touching her eyeball. She's literally poking her eyeball, and I guess she didn't feel anything. So she's like, is this even a real body? And
I can't get Cursed out of my head, man. I look at her, I think about Curse every time.
Little Pim.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nuts. But like you said, she's a wild card, and she might turn on the other Lost Boys, on Curly, on Cavalier. I don't know, but she's a lot of fun.
Talking about the way that she feels too kind of reminds me, and this might be somewhat of a transition into a different conversation, but when the Lost Boys all return, and same thing with some of the soldiers come back, and then all of the specimens, and Boy Cavalier's hype. He's so excited. But the first conversation he has with Kirsch is Kirsch kind of saying to him, like, was all of this worth it? Like, was it actually worth it to risk these decades of work for something new and shiny? And I'm kind of thinking like there might be an element here of this new stuff that they can play around with and learn from is going to completely take their eye off the ball of the whole point of the company, which is creating these hybrids, because if they never find these alien specimens, why can't I speak and say words? These alien specimens, I was throwing out something crazy on both those pronunciations, but they would be working 24/7 on the hybrid thing. They would be analyzing how they're all feeling. They'd be doing tests. They'd be like working on their personalities and things like that. And it just seems like they're going to take such a back seat to all of this new, interesting frontier research. And that's just going to spell so much trouble, and I think Nibs is really the tip of that iceberg.
That's a great reason of why the hybrids don't survive past the show Alien Earth. I can totally buy that. This is like the step one of the butterfly effect that will lead to them not being complete. I don't know what that means for Wendy in the end, because she clearly can't survive. But another part of the scene that I thought was amazing was Kirsch reprimanding him about everything you just said. And then he was so irresponsible about it all, the Boy Cavalier that he walks up to the egg and it's about to open and hatch, and he like freaks out and he like pushes him away. I completely forgot, or maybe this is new. I really don't know. I don't think I ever remember a situation where the egg closed back up, because I guess every time it almost happens, the biological victim is always staying close enough for it to actually pop open. But I love the idea that if the biological being isn't around it enough, it does reclose and kind of waits in a hibernation phase, and which allows all of the synths to freely experiment and work with it all. It's just a cool concept. It makes the xenomorphs even more interesting. Maybe that is a thing and I just completely forgot, but I like that they highlighted here, because I had that question earlier when they were around the original egg hatchlings, and you saw it start to open up, and I guess they left before it closed up, and they didn't show it closing up until this scene.
Yeah, like it was gonna go for Morrow, and Kirsch was like, "Oh, you better get out of here." So
Yeah.
like if there's any organics, I guess it will trigger it. Which when they were transporting them and they were in the lab, I was like, dude, get those eggs back in a box. Like this is lab safety. For being a scientist, Kirsch, you are breaking a lot of rules here. To continue with the Cavalier stuff, when Kirsch was saying, was this all worth it? I kind of agreed, because we just got done talking about his motivation, which I loved. He wants another brilliant mind. Was this just greed? I know he says this is $1 trillion of R&D that Utani just dropped in our lap, but like at the same time, I was like, is putting your dream at risk? You know, Wendy, the first one that he loves, was it really worth it? So it was a little confusing. And even Dame Sylvia, she's like, yo, we're putting out a product like really soon. Why are we distracting ourselves with all of this? So
Mhm.
I don't want to say that we're seeing Cavalier make mistakes, but he's at least being questioned by his companions, his employees, I guess, which makes me wonder, like, are we going to see him in like a real vulnerable moment? Is he, for being the boy genius, is he gonna mess up and revert to being a child and like sob like a baby or throw a tantrum or something?
Yeah, that
Well, I
could be
think
the end game.
yes. Yeah, I think yes for sure. And I would say I would go as far as to say I think he is making a mistake, and I really think that's part of the point. You know, I didn't listen to the official podcast for episode 3, but on episode 1, the Noah Hawley, the show creator, the main writer, is talking about Boy Cavalier and kind of saying of, you know, if you look at majority of like the richest people in the world, one of their major flaws is that because they are so rich, they have so much money, they've been so successful in one kind of area of thing, they are intelligent, they fall into the trap of, oh, I'm good at everything, you know, I know enough about everything. And it seems like Boy Cavalier is really smart and good at whatever it is with this creation of the hybrids and the transferring of human consciousness and things like that. And it feels like he's kind of falling into the trap of like, oh, because I'm good at this stuff and I've made all this money and I'm so successful, is that I'll obviously be successful and good at this next thing. And it's just going to underestimate what is actually the danger with all of these alien life forms. And you can see the thread of like, you know, like I've studied biology of humans, you know, I'm good at all that stuff, you know, the concept of consciousness and all of those things, like it could translate. And also Kirsch is running point on a lot of the scientific stuff. And as a synth, I'm sure he's infinitely intelligent, you know, more so than the average person. But it does feel like Boy is wading into some waters that he's maybe not so qualified to
Yeah.
wade
Boy.
into.
Sounds weird when you call him by boy.
I guess he's like, yeah, nobody's stopped me yet, and I've gotten this far, so I must always be right, and keeps it trucking. Which I guess, yeah, we can bring that into the science experiments that Kirsch is doing, the testing, and it seems to be that Toodles and, was it Nibs was there, or was his hands, or was that Curly just kind of being
Curly.
okay, Curly.
Curly was videotaping.
Yes, Curly and Toodles seem to be the helpers here. But so they were doing a couple tests here and there, cutting into the egg, getting the face hugger out. Obviously, Wendy is waking up and reacting to this the whole time. And this is when they also showed the little tick going into the lung. And they also showed the larvae getting pulled out and thrown into a little vial there. To me, I just took the larvae as like that is what the face hugger implants in you, and kind of that's what
Wait,
will grow.
was the larva not what they put into the tank with the
Yeah.
lung?
Oh, okay. No,
Yeah.
you're totally right. Sorry, I got mixed up there. I thought it was the little tick thing for a second, but you're totally right.
Yeah, no, it's fine, because also at the same time, like you just laid out two things. This was like a triple parallel scene. You also see Hermit going through his surgery here, which is he going to wake up? Are they going to put that in him, and then now they're going to bring the organ and put it back into him and let that create? I don't know why that wouldn't create a basic xenomorph, just as we've seen a million times, but it feels different than what we've seen in the past, to the point where something has to be different than, I don't know, maybe it's just them manually doing all the work in place of the face hugger, or it could be its own new type of xenomorph. Who knows? It's going to be something that he's going to deal with and to probably die by through the next couple of episodes.
Or he could become a cyborg, because the way I was taking it, I was like, this lung is trash. Throw it in there. Give him, synthetic lung, and then all of a sudden he's going to wake up and be like half cyborg here.
It's the best case scenario for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because the idea of them giving a xenomorph larva, zygote, whatever you want to say, like organic tissue to play with, like I get that, but if they use it then to like put it back into Hermit to get the chest busting effect and actually birthing the xenomorph out of it, feels like a crazy roundabout way to
They could have
do
just
that.
put the face hugger in with him, right, and locked him in
Yeah,
a cage.
exactly.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
they could have
saying.
just popped it
There
into his
has to be
body.
some result here that is not the typical A to B to C that we've seen in every Alien movie. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I know Wendy would not be happy about any of that. Using Hermit, her brother, as this test subject is probably a no-go, but also the Curly conversation with Boy, she mentions, again, comparing herself to Wendy of, I think about things, I'm interested in learning more, and she only cares about her brother. And that's quite the obstacle for her realizing the potential that Boy wants out of her. So if they want to go about a way to remove Hermit from the conversation and remove him from her focus in some way, I could totally see that being a motivation as well. It just feels like some roundabout ways to go about stuff.
But epic music when she passes out.
So good. Well, the one thing is interesting of, they just leave her there. She was in the lab with
Yeah, they
them,
weren't
and like
reacting to her.
it seemed like Kirsch would have walked past her with the zygote larvae in the tube, and then they just kind of left her on the ground and it's like, no, this Metallica is sick.
Yeah, I was like, all right, distract him with music. But I had the same exact note. I was like, how did Kirsch walk out with the sample and not see Wendy just sprawled on the ground or even hear her? And then the only other thing I didn't exactly understand / like was Cavalier says to Kirsch when he's on the ship, assume I know everything because I can see through their eyes. And then he was like, where's Wendy? I was like, wouldn't you be watching Wendy's eyes as well in camera? So that was the only other thing I didn't love. But I mean, there's so much good to this show. You don't even double think about it.
I have a question here that maybe is our final conversation, or maybe it's just something we look out for more evidence of in episode 4, but at least in the original Alien movie, the big twist, I would say, or one of, obviously the big twist of finding out how the xenomorphs work is interesting, and that's a main part of the movie. But the other kind of twist, and I would say the biggest twist, is the fact that there is a synth that is kind of working against the crew. He's basically the secondary antagonist in the movie because he's willing to sacrifice all of them just to get the xenomorph back to Earth. And I'm kind of curious if Kirsch is almost going to fit within that realm, but in a different way, not because they want to get the xenomorph back to Earth to do tests, because they've already achieved that in this sense. But Kirsch, the biggest thing that has stood out, I think, in these 3 episodes is that monologue that he has to Wendy of, human beings are just food. Like at the end of the day, you can create as much as you want, you can build as much as you want, but in nature, there's always going to be something bigger. There's always going to be something stronger. There's always going to be something smarter. At the end of the day, you're going to be food. I wonder, and again, because the xenomorph, and this is through David, right? It's kind of pegged as this like perfect being, this like peak of evolution. They talk about that a lot, I think, too, in the first movie. And I wonder if Kirsch gets enamored with it. If he gets so interested in the xenomorph and like maybe almost in its like right to rule, in a sense, like the laws of the jungle. Like if it is the peak of evolution, and that he kind of not necessarily turns, but like goes down that route slightly.
So the only thing I will point out is that one of the first scenes of Prometheus, when you see David talking to Wayland, you find out about his operating model, where every single synth you pretty much have seen throughout the Alien movies has had the directive programmed into them from Wayland Yutani to complete the mission, which is why they're usually like, okay, let's get these xenomorphs back to Earth. It's not necessarily that they want to see them succeed. It's because it's their directive. Then you take the case of David, and what's special about him is that he's given free will. And free will in quotations, like he's not given a specific directive, and what he decides to do with that, it evolves into his appreciation and his worship of like the xenomorphs and their perfect beingness. The difference with Kirsch is, I would assume, just in the same way all the other synths had directives from Weyland Yutani, that he has a directive from Boy Cavalier. So something would need to happen for him to break away from that, because I'm just under the assumption that he doesn't have that free will that David did. David was a one of one case study. So I don't know, but yeah, who knows? It could go either way. It depends how much free will Boy Cavalier would have wanted to give Kirsch being like the head synth. So I think it's a slightly different situation, because we've already would have seen some signs, I think, of him wanting to straight up just prioritize these biological beings. Instead, he was reprimanding Boy Cavalier and saying, like, you shouldn't be doing this. So like in that way, if he followed that vein of thinking and he listened to Kirsch in the moment, he would have shut it down, given it back to Yutani, and they would have been peaceful. So I don't know. He would have to have a little bit more character growth, and we would need to see that happen on screen for me to buy that he's going to take the David route. Because I just think he's like an appendage of Boy Cavalier as of now.
Yeah. I kind of assume Boy Cavalier has like some type of security measure that Kirsch can't turn on him. But originally, right, Kyle, that's where I thought you were going to go with it. Like Kirsch was going to be like, oh, the future synth, we're not going to be food for anybody, we'll just rule. But I loved that aspect of he is becoming so entranced with this perfect life form. Like he's smiling when he's dissecting everything and bringing the larvae to the lungs. He like looks like he's enjoying it. And just going back to the conversation that he had, with Marcy before she turned into Wendy about the scorpion, like, can he use that logic to justify killing off humanity to protect this life form, right? Because that was his whole thing. It was like, well, what if another scorpion comes along and tries to, kill me because I'm trying to kill this one? It's like, who's the good guy, who's right and who's wrong type of thing. And that conversation about the scorpion could shift his alignment over almost. So I didn't think about that at all, but now that's a lot to think about. I love that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to draw some additional meaning from, I feel like the with him, there's more than just, I think, meets the eye, like the things that he's saying. They just have shots of him where it's just like him. And it's like he's thinking kind of, but he's a synth. So it's, what is he actually thinking about?
Yeah, I guess it does boil down to, if he is given the free will and he does evolve, he probably, why would he not take the same route as David? Because David's the same thing as him. So like it would make sense. It's just, how much freedom does he have to grow as a synth?
Yeah, and it's also like, it could be super interesting for, let's say, Paul and I to experience that storyline, but also people who have seen all of the movies have kind of already experienced that storyline. So would they do it again? Although I know that Noah Hawley, again, the creator, the writer, I'm pretty sure has spoken somewhat negatively about the prequel films and things like that. I don't know. We'll maybe keep an eye out on it, just kind of see what happens. I think it'll probably be proved wrong, and I think quite easily, but just, again, trying to find a little bit of reading between the lines on his character.
I love it.
Only other thing I want to keep an eye out for is the mystery about, how did the ship crash? Did the species get loose? Did somebody sabotage? Was Mr. Tang a bastard, as we keep talking about? And I love, this episode, and it is progressing the present storyline, but I just don't want to forget about that in the ship and all those characters there. But that's it. That's all I have. And maybe we'll get that through Morrow. I assume we're going to get it the more we get it Morrow.
Yeah, I think Morrow making the decision to stay, I think Yutani is going to have to adapt. How will she adapt? What kind of support is she going to be able to give him? Or will they just write it off of whatever he can do might be positive and that's what it is? I don't think she's willing to let that stuff go, the specimens and so on and so forth. Then we have the butler guy, whatever his name is, Amos. it kind of tells me and Smiley, like, we're in a facility in the middle of the ocean. Like, no one's coming here. It's like, okay, someone's coming there.
Oh, yeah.
More than just Morrow, probably.
Definitely.
All right. That sounds like it's going to do it for our coverage of episode 3 of Alien Earth Metamorphosis. I kind of saved this for last because I forgot to say it in the beginning, but somewhat disappointing IMDb scores. They're all like 7.8, 7.9, 8. I can't tell if that's, the subject matter experts, the alien lovers of the world are kind of maybe disappointed in some things, so it gets a lower rating. But I'm much higher on this show, I would say, than a high 7 or an 8 at this point. And I can't wait to be back here every single week covering each episode as they drop right here on Binge Empire with the 3 of us. Also, beyond Binge Empire, so I started this episode saying of all the things we're covering on this podcast, Bingetown TV is more than just Binge Empire. We also have a podcast called The Core, which is where we cover all things Apple TV Plus. You heard us mention that we cover Foundation. That is what's going on over on The Core. Season 3 has been fantastic and, dare I say, interesting. And we're there weekly covering those episodes, having a blast. It's Luke, me, and our good friend and fearless leader, Jimmy. So if you're interested in some more content, some more shows, if you're watching Foundation and you're looking for coverage, head on over to The Core, and that's where you'll find that. And then the best way to join the conversation with us, beyond maybe the YouTube comments or tweeting at us, is going to be to join the Discord. So bingetowntv.com/Discord. That'll get you into there. I think we're flirting with 600 of us in there right now. We're talking about Alien Earth. We're talking about Dexter Resurrection. We're talking about Foundation. We're talking about Survivor. We're talking about Big Brother. We're talking about almost everything that's happening in TV and movies at this point. So if you're looking for a community to do that more with, then join the Discord. Like I mentioned, bingetowntv.com/Discord. And that's going to do it. So for the final time this episode, we are Binge Empire, and thank you so much for listening.